June is National Camping Month, and this summer nearly 23 million people are expected to go RV camping. Our next guest says you don't have to own an RV to join in on the fun. Here to tell us more, Janine Petit, founder of girlcamper.com, and this is her own Mini Max RV behind us.
Yes, it is. This is my Mini Max.
And you've driven this for the last 5 weeks?
I just got back from a 5-week trip to Texas. Yeah, I road tested this trailer for Liberty Outdoors. It's part of my job as their brand ambassador. And it's just my rolling she shed on wheels.
And this is all for a nice lady, right?
It's a girl camper.
I gotta check
this out. Yeah, we like it. Yeah. Isn't it cute?
Love it. Be kind.
Yes, be kind.
Of course.
We like people to be kind.
And you've got some quilts in here. It's cozy,
I've got
but
everything I need here. I've got a kitchen. I've got a 2-burner stove, a microwave. I have a full bathroom in here. I got the biggest fridge going, and it's cozy. It's homey. It's my rolling home on wheels. So
how much is this to rent?
What's that?
How much would this be to rent?
To rent, I don't know. I don't know what they are to rent, but
can you rent these, or you just?
I don't know if you can rent this one specifically, but you can rent trailers. But you can start RVing. You can buy a little she shed on wheels for starting at $9,000. It's not a ton of money. And I tell women, stop getting your nails done and buy a camper.
Put the money towards the camper and decorate it.
$119 a month, you know, and you could have a she shed. Yeah.
Well, someone who is an expert camper is our own Ed Henry over here.
Oh, yeah?
Ed, what do you got for us?
That's true. This was actually designed by a NASA architect.
It is. The architect here is an interesting guy. Mikhail Martin is the founder of Brothers of Climbing. And tell us about Brothers of Climbing.
Yeah, so we're an organization bringing underrepresented groups into the outdoors, and we bring them on climbing trips, and we host festivals. We have a lot of fun.
Very cool. Where can people learn more about your organization?
You can go on boccrew.com or follow us on Instagram at boccrew.
All right, now tell us about this really cool vehicle behind us here.
So behind me is an adventure vehicle. Like this is where the real deal happens. We have all the conveniences of being, at home, but you can bring it out in the great outdoors with you. You can be in a national park, and you have a cooking stove, you have an AC, all the conveniences that you need.
We've got breaking news here, though. Ed Henry's never been in a camper before.
It's his first time. Can you park this at the Ritz-Carlton? Like, if you want to drive it there so I can stay?
Well, I'll tell you, it's really easy to maneuver and drive. Yeah. You can tow it on using many vehicles.
It's great.
Yeah.
Very good use of space, very compact, and the way it's designed, like I said, a NASA architect. Every single inch in here, you've got the bed over there, you've got this very tight kitchen.
It's almost like a tiny house for camping. Right?
I would definitely describe this as home away from home.
Yeah.
If all the conveniences of being at home are here, AC, stove, electricity, bathroom.
That's why
What's the name of this again?
like it.
This is the Taxa Outdoors Mantis.
Mantis.
Yes.
This might be your style.
I might want to do it. For more information, you can visit GoRVing.com. We want to thank Janine Petit and Mikhail Martin for actually bringing us out here and showing it to us. It looks really awesome.
Yeah. Well done, sir. Thanks. Appreciate it. More Fox and Friends, moments away.
It's about 30 degrees hotter right here.
Here's the deal. The truth about your campfire when you're camping is you do it at night or to make your food in the morning. But once it's hot and the sun's out, you get away.
It goes away. Sweating.
I am sweating big time. Yeah. But you always have to have kind of a fire going at the campsite.
So is there always like a steakhouse really close by where you can just go eat?
In Ed's world,
all right,
yes.
Coming up tomorrow.
All right, ready?
My dad is joining us.
Wait, your dad's coming?
Yeah, you don't want to miss it.
All right, Abby's dad tomorrow. Head to FoxFriends.com.
All right, let's do this. Fox on top of the scramble to nail that North Korean summit down. Amid talk, another one with this guy is just being teed up. Who says Saturdays are for resting? Folks, we are just starting. Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you. I'm Neil Cavuto. And no rest for the weary this busy Saturday morning, including one President Trump, who's at Camp David, we are told, making calls and studying up for that big powwow with North Korea's Kim Jong-un now only 10 days away. Can you believe that? This is where it all goes down, of course, in Singapore, where the frantic prep work is back on, which explains the busy comings and goings that we've noticed at the State Department and the White House this hour, where they're still trying to iron out the wrinkles, including, brace yourself, who picks up the tab for Kim Jong-un's hotel. I kid you not. We'll explain, you decide. And they're already calling it the letter that changed everything, from the leader of North Korea to the leader of the United States. It wasn't a text, not a tweet, not an email, a letter. Kids, listen up and take note. We're going to teach you something about the value of the written word. So put that gadget down and take note of the timing of all of this. The highest ranking North Korean to be the U.S. president since 2000. That was also the year of the USS Cole attack. Remember that one? Well, its commander, Kirk Lippel, sure does. A threat from foreign entities who said they did not wish us ill, but apparently did. The commander's message, of course, talk and trust, but keep talking and verify. And keep reading. You got that New York Times headline right. The jobs report that is too good for words, but apparently too much for Nancy Pelosi to handle? Oh yeah, about that blue wave, let's just say this Saturday morning, more like shifting sands, and why some on the left are fearing, well, the shift has just hit the fan. I got that out just the way I wanted to. Meanwhile, we hit the ground running, beginning with the latest on those North Korea trade talks with Rich Edson at the State Department. Hey, Rich.
Hey, good morning, Neil. And State Department officials have always been targeting a June 12th summit in Singapore between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. Now they can conduct their planning with a little bit more confidence. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says it's up to his team to bridge the divides between the two sides and put much of that on North Korea. The secretary says North Korea must make a strategic shift away from a path that it has followed for decades. Officials say North Korea believes its nuclear program provides its security, and it's up to the United States to convince Kim Jong-un that his nuclear weapons are actually a threat to his regime. Traveling in Singapore, Secretary of Defense James Mattis says the U.S. military presence in Korea is, quote, not on the table in Singapore on the 12th, nor should it be. He says that's a matter between the United States and South Korea. And as these discussions are ongoing between the United States and North Korea, there are also talks between the United States and the Russian government about a potential summit between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. A U.S. official confirms that and says they are in the very early stages of that planning. Neil?
All right, Rich, thanks you very, very much. In the meanwhile, reports the U.S. is seeking for a discreet way to pick up the tab for Kim Jong-un's hotel in Singapore. I kid you not, there are reasons for this. Garrett Kenney with some of those reasons on the latest. Garrett.
Well, Neil, the U.S. has a delegation in Singapore right now that's trying to work out a lot of the logistical details for this summit, and they plan even the smallest of details for these summits, everything from the location to the seating to the colors of the tablecloths. But the Washington Post reports that one very sensitive issue they're trying to work out now is who is going to pay for Kim Jong-un's hotel stay. A presidential suite at the resort of choice for the North's leader cost more than $6,000 a night, according to the paper. And while the North can't afford to build intercontinental ballistic missiles, it claims it's too poor to pay for foreign travel. The U.S. is reportedly willing to pay for the hotel, two sources familiar with the talks told the paper, though that would require a temporary lifting of sanctions against the North. However, the U.S. team is also aware the North may view the U.S. paying for the lodging as an insult, so the delegation is reportedly considering asking the host country of Singapore to foot the bill. Now, we saw this issue came up during the 2018 Winter Olympics in South Korea when South Korea reportedly paid $2.6 million for the North to send a cheering squad to the games. And the International Olympic Committee paid for 22 of North Korea's athletes to travel to the event as well. Neil?
All right, thank you, my friend. That's going to be an interesting one to swallow if we have to do that,
Absolutely.
But it is what it is. All right, now, how do we avoid, regardless of who picks up a tab at hotels, from being hoodwinked by the North Koreans? I asked that of the guy who negotiated with them the last go-round. We've been disappointed, some would cynically say schnookered, by the North Koreans in the past. If you had to give advice right now, well, what would it be?
Well, it would be, if you have an agreement with the North Koreans, do enormously lot of inspections, international inspectors, American inspectors. Make sure that their timelines, that the North Koreans give their inventory of all their missile and nuclear sites. Many are underground, they're hidden. That there be very unfettered access to those inspections.
All right, Bill Richardson was, of course, Bill Clinton's trade rep on negotiating with the North Koreans that first go-round. Of course, you know how that ended up. The North Koreans did everything right in the beginning, and then they stopped doing it right, and then they started lying. Then they started kicking away inspectors, and, of course, the rest is history. Former USS Cole Commander Kirk Lippold, National Security Analyst Morgan Ortegas. Welcome to both of you. You know, Commander, the timing of our visit is unique in that it was in 2000 that we last had a high-ranking North Korean delegation visiting the White House. That was also the summer that year that the USS Cole was hit, a preview of tragic coming attractions. What advice do you have for the principals when they sit down?
The first thing they're going to need to do, Neil, is sit down and make sure that they understand from a technical perspective how we're going to have an ironclad, verifiable process to ensure that we know how many nukes do they have, how many ballistic missiles do they have that can mate up with them, where are all of the facilities from the technical research and development all the way through the manufacturing of the warheads themselves. Then we need to make sure that we can inspect each of those to whatever degree is necessary to ensure that we have a process by which they can denuclearize, and we will have control of that process with international inspectors only assisting. The U.S. has to maintain control of this because clearly the IAEA is proven unable and unwilling to do it.
You know, in the past, Morgan, even when later on President Bush was trying to deal with the same intransigent government, the idea was we want to get inspectors in there to verify this. And in the beginning, much like in the Clinton years, the North Koreans were all eager, yep. And then they started refusing, and then they started delaying, and then they started cheating. And then, of course, well, you know the rest of the story. How do we avoid that?
Well, I think the difference between those times and where we are now is that during that time, I think most of the world thought the Bush administration was, for obvious reasons, distracted in the Middle East. And what we're seeing, of course, now is that President Trump has the credible threat of force. I think everyone thinks he is serious, that his defense secretary is quite serious. And that, I think, is the major difference, is we were involved in 2 other wars, which we're still in Iraq and Afghanistan. But I think President Trump's threat of force is more credible this time.
You know, Commander, we're also learning the White House is working on another level, reaching out to the Russians about arranging another summit with Vladimir Putin on this one to presumably address Syria, maybe take a look at the Ukraine, but I wouldn't doubt address South Korea. What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, leveraging off what Morgan just said, when you look at it, the United States now has a president who is willing to exercise with capability and credibility the fact that we will back up all the other national instruments of power to ensure that we get what we need. We're seeing it in North Korea, and I think if we sit down with the Russians and begin to look at, hey, here's where you're involved in the world, here is where it is interfering with our national security interests, what are yours, what are ours, and where can we come to a negotiated agreement on where we can each do this without endangering the risk or having the risk of it getting into a larger conflict. So I think that this president, with capability and credibility through Secretary Mattis and the Department of Defense, truly can have meaningful and fruitful negotiations, both with North Korea and Russia.
You know, Morgan, I'm hearing this Washington Post story, and of course, we've not been able to verify, but others are quoting it, where the North Koreans are looking for some help in picking up their hotel tab when they're in Singapore. And I'm thinking to myself that China's a benefactor and a big friend. Can't China do that? I mean, why are we getting bogged down in something like that already?
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy story. I mean, the amount of money that they're spending on these nuclear weapons, ballistic weapons, chemical weapons, biological weapons, perhaps, you know, one less of those and be able to afford your hotel bill. So it's a little bit ridiculous.
Can't they seek out a cheaper hotel? The one they're looking at is $6,000 a night. I know there's a Best Western just around the block. They could.
There's got to be. Right. I stayed at the Raffles Hotel in Singapore. It's nice. It wasn't $6,000 a night.
That's Commander Lippold kind of money there, so I don't know. But Commander,
I know.
These are the things you find out behind the scenes are going on and the little pet peeves, so I don't want to take them out of context. But what are your hopes for these talks? What will ultimately come of them?
I think what we're going to see out of these talks, Neil, is the framework established for a path to denuclearization that will occur very, very quickly, hopefully. We want to make sure that it comes at a point where we learn as much as possible during these, or at least establish the framework for it, so that we know what they have, how we're going to get there. And by the same token, the North Koreans know, here are the benefits that can be accrued. Here's what you will receive economically. Here is what you will receive diplomatically for recognition in the world. This is a whole new world we're going to open up for them. They need to understand that, but they also need to understand that there are constraints and requirements that go with it. By the same token, the Chinese are going to have a say in this, but they're not going to be a player at the table.
Morgan, you've worked, of course, with the Bush administration. You know a thing or two about diplomacy and how it works. This is upending all the rules, Diplomacy 101, State Department 101, whatever you want to call it. And that here we are with a president who's done everything against the book and now is on the verge of making history. And I'm wondering how that is going to redefine negotiations of future presidents going forward.
Well, he has so many balls to juggle in Asia. I mean, when you look at it, even our allies are not really on the same page. When you look at the Japanese, for example, Abe wants the president to take an incredibly tough line to insist on complete and verifiable and irreversible denuclearization. When you look at the South Koreans, they've taken a much softer stance, I should say, than the Japanese, because clearly they're the ones that would be most affected by any conflict in terms of loss of lives. And then, of course, you have the Chinese, who really have no interest in helping us at all with the North Korean situation. They have to be pushed there. We saw Secretary Mattis in Singapore yesterday at the dialogues there, who was talking about the nefarious activities that you see China doing in the South China Sea, and how they are intimidating and there's coercion taking place there. So I think when you look at the Asian theater as a whole, the president has a lot on his plate, not just on North Korea. Our allies are not necessarily on the same page. So he has an incredibly difficult balancing act. But again, I think the difference here, as you said, is he's upending 30 years of the way that we have engaged with these allies, I think in a good way that will lead to results.
All right. Fingers crossed, as they say. Guys, thank you both very, very much for coming in on a Saturday. Much appreciated. By the way, just as they were talking, I've dug up at least 13 hotels in the Singapore area where room rates average anywhere from $300 to $600 a night. Not a one $6,000 a night. Some are pedigree names, but the fact of the matter, there are choices here. So if we are going to pick up the tab, we do have, well, there's a Howard Johnson's here. I'll just leave it at that. All right, in the meantime, the cost of the Russia investigation now at $17 million. I'm not here to debate the cost. I am here to take a look at whether that price tag means prosecutors go for blood. I'm getting email from staff members who are already staying in Singapore and reminding us, Neil, do not go cheap on us because if they get any wind of these hotels you're quoting, we're going to be there. But I must do this for taxpayers in America because that's the way we roll. All right, we're keeping tabs of that because that, by the way, is a big reason why people are a little flummoxed by this note that we might pick up the hotel tab for the North Korean delegation. But we'll see. It's way too early to tell, and it's really not a big deal, but I find it kind of humorous. Meanwhile, this isn't humorous here. It's a $17 million tab for the ongoing Mueller investigation. That is as of now. You know, I don't know what you think of that, but I'm not here to debate the tab. And certainly, Lisa Giovinazzo has told me it's not an unusually high tab. In fact, it's a fraction of what the Ken Starr investigation was costing. But your argument, Liz, is that let's not focus on that. My argument is I'm focusing on it to the degree that it almost compels those doing the investigating to come up with something.
Well, certainly a higher price tag, right? It leads to more accountability. And prosecutors, look, they're driven to find a result. So there's an investigation. They want to have an answer. Nobody wants to set out on an endeavor and come up with nothing. And this investigation, they did uncover certain things, right? 19 people were charged. Right. There were 3 plea deals. But when is enough enough? You know,
but would that be enough, Lisa, to say, all right, we have justified our expense. We uncovered the stuff in areas that we didn't originally pursue, that we came up to pursue. The Ken Starr investigation, look, with Bill Clinton, it was started on real estate transactions. It veered into a relationship with an intern. And that only came up through discussions with Linda Tripp when she volunteered it. So what do you think's going on here?
Well, I think they've widened the net. I think they are trying to validate the expenditures. Certainly, they're trying to engage this investigation into a very larger stratosphere, and it does seem to obviously be politically motivated, which I think every American can say we don't really want our legislative process controlling our politics, but that's what's happening. I do think that this investigation thus far could be validated, and it should come to a conclusion. I don't think obstruction of justice has been proven against the president. I don't think that they have an underlying offense, and that's why they keep fishing. You know, you cast the line, you want to hook a fish. They were somewhat successful in the Russia probe, but I think that they're going beyond the scope at this point. We haven't heard a lot from Mueller in the past 2 months. We haven't heard any new indictments. And so you're kind of wondering, what is his next comment? What is the next step?
I'm wondering, too, about the cost and the need to ransack offices like the president's lawyer, his former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, his home in the early in the morning. Those are unusual measures to take, and they have to be justified. Someone approves them, obviously, and says there's reason to do them, but I'm not here to debate that. But that begs the question, all right, you're searching for something to, again, I'm getting back to this price tag.
Well, you're validating the cost of an investigation. You're trying to come up with something. Of course, prosecutors...
Would it be deemed a disappointment, let's say, just politicize this to the left, and that's all you came up with?
I think, I think it would be deemed a disappointment for people on the left. I think it would be a win for people on the right.
What does your gut tell you? Is that what will come down to?
I think it will come down to that. I think it will be extended beyond, because we are coming into midterm elections, and this is proving to weigh on those elections. I think it
When
could
you say
turn.
extended beyond, so we won't have an answer, an investigation wrapped up before the midterms?
I doubt it.
Really?
Very doubtful.
Rudy Giuliani and others have hinted that that looks like.
Well, I think that's what they would want to see, and that's what we should see. That's what we should see.
What about the president talking to Mueller? You and I were chatting a little bit about this. How likely is that?
It's probably not likely. At this point, again, there's no underlying offense. I think that it's pretty clear that they don't have enough on the president. So, look, he could speak to them in private, but any lawyer would tell him, but why? Because it's a fishing expedition and they're looking for something. If they don't have it, they should conclude the investigation and it should be over.
Yeah, Ken Starr was here last week. That's essentially what he said. It might not even be worth it. All right. Lisa, always good seeing you. Boy, she's a great lawyer at this and justifies the god-awful high legal fees involved here, right? Because lawyers all rally around it. Yeah, there you go. All right, in the meantime, forget about this blue wave in November. I think there's something that could disrupt it. A jobs wave right now after this. All right, as if I don't have enough to do, giving you the latest news on a Saturday morning, but I am trying to help out American taxpayers right now. And indications reported in the Washington Post that we're looking to assuage some of the North Koreans' concerns about very expensive hotel costs when they gather in Singapore just 10 days from now. One of the quoted figures was for $6,000 a night to house Kim Jong-un. And we immediately said we can do better than that. And surely enough, my crack staff, sometimes I wonder if they're not on crack, they've unearthed some real good hotel deals in the Singapore area, including Red Doors Plus. Average room rate, $76 versus $6,000. Now, if you want to go up a tad, I think you can look at the Grand Mercure, the Singapore Roxy, where it's $116. Although they do, when I get into this, they do have a presidential suite, which would only be fitting for the leader of North Korea, and that might go a little higher. But I very much doubt $6,000. So again, we're keeping tab of that, keeping tab of a lot of hotels in the area. Not a one, by the way, at this early stage, as we found approaching anything close to $6,000 a night. But I'm looking out for you, America. You're welcome. All right, in the meantime, you remember this?
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Here's how much of a nerd I am. When people ask me about, Neil, what do you remember about the year 1969? I know that's the obvious example that comes to mind, but what I remember about it, being the numbers nerd at Fox, is we had a 3.8% unemployment rate. We just matched it in the latest month. First time in half a century. Did this briefly in 2000, but think of that. We are now back to employment levels we were looking at in the 1960s, 1969. That is remarkable. So what does it mean? And given all this attention we have on a suddenly strong jobs report, a momentum that seems to be picking up, not slowing down, what could that mean to the political landscape as well? But let's get the read from all of this with Dave Brat, the Republican, the beautiful state of Virginia. Congressman, you know, that is in and of itself startling, and you've seen it certainly in your neck of the woods. But this was supposed to be the year that the slowdown would begin. Yet for the first 5 months of this year, the job gains have picked up dramatically. What's going on?
Yeah, well, it's impressive. I know you weren't born yet in '69, so that you studied that.
If that were true. All right, go ahead.
No, you're so young. So it's good, but it's huge. If you recall, the Democrats' talking points on tax cuts, nothing was going to happen. It's going to hurt people. In fact, it's the exact opposite. Kennedy knew all this, right? Kennedy said the best way to get the economy roaring is to lower tax rates. We had a report, federal government revenues are overflowing now. The unemployment rates are all at their historic lows. Overall, African-American, Hispanic unemployment rates, all-time historic lows. People are coming back in the workforce. The capital accumulation statistics are coming out. That's probably the most important, right? That's the capital is the driver of economic growth. So capital's up, manufacturing optimism is up, consumer sentiment is up. Those are all indexes, right? University of Michigan has those, so people can look them up. Those aren't just on a whim. They're carefully tracked by economists over time. And so it's great news across the board. I think I just heard the Atlanta Fed has economic growth the next quarter over 4 again. I'll verify that.
Indeed, they talked about 4.5% at a minimum, maybe 4.8%. Yeah. Now, they've been wrong before. They're the one that took that lead, yeah. But you're almost certain to be right that it's going to be stronger than recent quarters we've seen. And I'm wondering how Republicans handle that. Already Nancy Pelosi has kind of poo-pooed this latest number, even though no less than the New York Times in a headline couldn't find words enough to praise it, but that it's doing too little to the families hit with soaring new costs under the Republicans' watch. What do you think of that?
I think it's just absurd. The Democrats, Nancy's reaching there. I just had an event with 100 pastors on family breakdown, opioids, human trafficking, et cetera. All of that is linked to the lack of success and lack of jobs, right? So if we put people back into the labor force, the Democrats ruined the economy back in the housing crisis, right? Fannie and Freddie is responsible for the collapse back in '07. We're finally coming out of that. Now you've got a tax cut and real dramatic growth is coming up. Everybody knows what's going on. I fully anticipate African-American, Hispanic, everyone in the country comes to the Republican side of the table coming up. There's just tremendous good news. Everybody knows it. It's just obvious. So the Democrats will have their talking points. They don't have an alternative, right? So usually they pivot off to identity politics or some negative stuff. Because they don't have an economic plan. They never have. They can't tell you what causes economic growth. We just totally incentivized depreciation for capital assets. And now you see the immediate evidence of an increase in capital accumulation, which causes economic growth, which causes jobs, which causes hiring, which causes wages to go up. Wages are going up for the first time. Wages have been flat for 30 years. Right. Bernie and Trump both ran on wages and until Hillary rigged the thing against Bernie. And then the establishment kind of took over that
but you're
side.
Right, the wage thing is real. It's running at a 2.7% clip. It could go still higher. Yeah. You almost sound like an economics professor. Oh, wait, you were one. All right, Congressman, thank you very, very much. Good seeing you again.
Yeah, always great to be on, Neil. Thank you.
Dave Brad. All right, in the meantime here, what could disrupt this? I mean, what could be the half-empty glass we're missing? Well, tariffs are one. Big surcharges on things you buy every day. That's another. That could be happening, but maybe not. We're on it after this. All right, this hotel in Singapore is a little pricier than the ones we mentioned. It's $470 a night. It is considered one of the more elite hotels in Singapore, the Shangri-La. We've been trying to do this and fetch prices here on word from the Washington Post that we might have to pick up the tab for the North Korean delegation, or more to the point, the North Korean leader. Not that we have a problem with that. If it gets people at a table, we'll pay for the table. But my point is, I think there are better deals to be had than $6,000 a night. That is like David Asman kind of money. And I think we we can do better, my friends. And the Shangri-La at $470 a night offers that. I don't know if that's a standard room rate. Perhaps if it's a large delegation, we can get still better deals. But we've come up with anything from as low as $75 a night. Right now, the Shangri-La is tops with $470. You know, I don't have time to do all this for you, but you're welcome, America. But I'll keep you on top of that. All right, in the meantime, we have a great economy, but we also have a potential trade war coming, and some Republicans are getting nervous. Take a look.
These tariffs, I believe, hit the wrong target. Europe, Canada, Mexico are not the problem. China and its transshipments and unfair practices are.
All right, that was House Ways and Means Committee boss Kevin Brady. What he's bemoaning is the fact that the president is quite serious about slapping tariffs on steel and aluminum products that largely eschew the Chinese for now, but are considered to be an opening salvo via our friends. Of course, the Germans are upset about this, the Canadians, the Mexicans, virtually the entire European Union. So they're all making it clear that they don't like this. This, as the Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross is dining in Beijing tonight with the Vice Premier talking about these and other issues, and we're told as well that the Chinese are not just going to roll over and play dead on this. Let's get the read on how significant this could be if this does turn into a trade war. Dagan McDowell is here, David Asman, along with market watcher Dan Geltrud, and Catalina Magazine's Kathy Aru. All right, Dagan, how big a deal is this potentially going to be?
It's already a really big deal. You've seen steel prices shoot up about 50% in the last year. This introduces the kind of uncertainty that we would be sitting here if it was President Barack Obama, we would be pulling our hair out. It introduces uncertainty into the business community when we've finally gotten good news on tax cuts, regulatory reform. The job market, as you've been pointing out, is actually picking up steam despite being more than 9 years into an expansion. But again, for American businesses that use steel and aluminum, and anybody who exports to Canada or Mexico and to Europe, those businesses are sitting back going, what's going to happen to my sales? What's going to happen to how I source my materials? Am I going to have to cut wages? Am I going to have to slow my hiring? And these are questions that are not being answered, and this administration won't be able to answer them for months, if not years to come.
What do you think, David?
I think what Dagan said is absolutely true. Everything is true. However, as much as I hate tariffs and the Europeans hate tariffs, they hate tariffs if we put them on, but they have a lot of tariffs of their own. We put together a list of the tariffs that they have just on steel, iron, and aluminum for most favored nation. They have 1,200 tariffs on most favored nation countries. Wow. Those are their friends. Total EU tariffs are about 20,000 for most favored nations. So while they hate tariffs when we apply them, they have no trouble applying them themselves.
You know, they're fighting fire with fire. I guess the idea being that they'll never have to be used. The deal will be had beforehand. Do you think that's
well? It's all part of the negotiations. But here's what I say, Neil. If we don't do something now, when are we ever going to do anything? We're just going to accept trade deficits. That's how it is. We have to have the lowest tariffs compared to all of our trade partners? No. I don't know if it's by accident or if Trump's a genius, but the timing is perfect. We have a strong economy. Now's the time to straighten this issue out. If we don't do it now, we will be in a weakened position perhaps somewhere down the line. It's the right time to do it. Nobody likes tariffs, but we have to address the issue.
Kathy, I know you're in the Trump is a genius category, so take it from there.
Oh, boy. So I don't know if he's a genius, but he is riding the momentum right now of unemployment at an all-time low. So the momentum is wonderful, and now is the time to pull what an economist is saying, a psychotic trade war. Now is the time we should do it. We should break trust relationships that have taken centuries to build with our neighbors, with Mexico and Canada.
Democrats, liberals love shielding industries.
Our neighbor, we don't like hurting our relationships with Canada and Mexico, our biggest trade partners.
But you don't mind propping up solar. You don't mind running tax-favored treatment to things that you like, right?
I was discussing Trump being a genius and the timing being wrong. And,
okay. Well, you raise a good point. But is the larger issue here that be careful what you wish for, Mr. President, because you just could get it, and then, of course, it's a war.
Yes.
It's heading in that direction, certainly going after Canada and Mexico and Europe allies. This is not just a financial and economic issue. It's a political one come the midterms. And it's also a national security issue. When you talk about, we get a lot of our steel from Canada, that actually hurts our national security rather than helping it, as the Commerce Department and these trade reps would argue. I want the president and his representatives, I want Peter Navarro and Wilbur Ross to actually start calling the 6.5 million workers in this country who work for steel consuming industries. Call the people who make motorboats, who are apple farmers in this country, who are going to be hurt by the retaliatory tariffs. If you go through the list of industries that are being hit in retaliation by Europe, Canada, and Mexico, these are American small business owners and farmers far and wide, and they deserve an explanation. I want some intellectual honesty. Tell the American people, we're raising your prices. We might cost you your job. We're doing this because we need to reduce the trade deficit.
As Dagan was saying at the beginning, particularly on the heels of such a magnificent success. I mean, you think of the way this economy has turned. I want to be clear. I think this, in terms of the economy and national security, I think this is the best president we've had since Reagan. However, and this gets to your point on trade deficits, I think his insistence that the key to a good economy is getting a trade balance is wrong. Forgive me, Mr. President, you're right on so many other things, but on this, you're dead wrong. One of the historically biggest trade deficits we'd ever had up until that point was 1984. You know how much the economy grew in 1984? 7.3%.
So we're chasing the wrong goat?
So trade, just an insistence, his insistence that trade deficits by themselves are the key to a healthy economy is wrong.
There's going to be little gain. I mean, all this talk, it's unpredictable. And at the end of the day, it's going to be little gain. This is for nothing.
But
what is this all about?
Nothing's gone into effect yet. No one's paying this 25% yet, the 10% yet. Now,
if he gets his way, what will happen?
Well, we'll see. If it doesn't, it worked, right?
Well, Wall Street doesn't agree. As we see on the stock market, none of this talk of trade war.
About a trade. Of course, Wall Street isn't a genius, but I mean, for now, they seem to be whistling, some would say, past the grave.
And Wall Street, I think, is getting accustomed to a president who talks big before. I think it's no coincidence, by the way. John Uber, our great producer, pointed this out. It's no coincidence.
I wouldn't call him great.
Well, he's okay.
He's a very nice guy.
But he made a great point, which is that Wilbur Ross right now is in China. He's not in Europe, he's in China. Maybe all of this stuff with Europe and Canada and Mexico is a warning to China. That's the way this president works. He says,
there's a method. There's a method to this.
I agree with you. It's about China.
No, it's half-baked. The method is half-baked because if you wanted to take on China...
Didn't you see the Wilbur Ross thing with the can of soup?
Yeah.
That's right.
And the beer.
Yeah.
Again, stop telling the American people this isn't going to have any impact on the economy and their jobs and their lives. And by the way, if you really want to take on China and push back on them stealing American technology, demanding us to hand over our technological prowess, then you lock arms with Europe and Canada and Mexico, because as a bigger force, they can take them on.
But a lot of them are deceitful little phonies too, right? I mean, no? Okay.
Well, they're not little.
All right, well.
They're big phonies.
They're big phonies. Kathy, you're optimistic as Wilbur.
Oh, my gosh. I'm just thinking, what are you going to do to these trusted relationships? It took centuries to build them, and now you're tearing them apart.
I am, really? Okay.
With your words.
All right, we're just doing a segment on this on cable. All right, so just relax. All right, my producer's saying, okay, there goes that credibility. Don't worry about it. I blew that a long time ago. All right, did you hear this now? They're trying to resurrect Roseanne's show without Roseanne. What would they call it? Not Roseanne? But by the way, there is precedent for this. They just might be able to make this work. I'll explain. You won't believe the new hotel deals we found in Singapore, but I digress. I want to get to the story of the moment, and still this week, a signature story on the week, of course, Roseanne. She's out. Her show was out, but maybe the show is not out. They might try to revive it without her. Of course, you can't call it Roseanne. Like I said, maybe not Roseanne, or everyone on the show except Roseanne. In the Foxlight, and my colleague and friend, Michael Tamero. Michael, how doable is that? They're seriously kicking it around, right?
Very doable, Neil. I mean, the reports are there's going to be a big meeting Monday over at ABC Disney with the producers of Roseanne to pitch how they can bring this show back. It's been done before.
Sure.
Everyone in this business is replaceable, except for you, Neil.
Right.
I think
and there's no spotlight without you.
I am the spotlight, baby.
Yeah.
One of the most recent examples is 1986, a show called Valerie, starring Valerie Harper. 1 year in, she got into a big salary dispute with NBC. They canned her. It came back the next season as Valerie's Family. They brought in Sidney Duncan a year later, and it turned into the Hogan Family and ran for about 6 seasons.
Really?
So it's been done. I mean,
well,
Three's
even House
Company.
of Cards on Netflix, right? Of course, Kevin Spacey's out. They're doing one final season, we're told, and it's already shot and done.
Yeah.
Without him. So, what do you think of the prospects? It's usually difficult when
I don't
the star
see
goes.
why they had to get rid of the character. Someone else can come in and play that character. Right. Kevin Spacey doesn't own, that character. He was great in it.
Right.
But there's been several James Bonds.
Yeah, that's
why
true.
not several
That's
Frank
interesting.
Underwoods?
So could you do? I never thought of that. So could you do a Roseanne look-alike or character-like?
She probably not with her, but they could bring it back as the Connors. Why not? And that cast is comedic gold. You have John Goodman, Laurie Metcalf, Estelle Parsons is on that show. And really the focus of, I don't know if you watched this first season, but really it's sort of centered around Sarah Gilbert's character. So I think that's probably more the direction where
and
the
the
show
whole
is going to go.
conservative tone obviously had an appeal in the beginning, but then the show veered away from politics. Period. That was how it got its signature attention. But do you think it's an indictment of conservative-themed entertainment? I think that's even a stretch to apply here.
Yeah, I sort of agree with you on that. Everyone's saying, ABC was just looking for a reason to get rid of that show. That's absurd. That show was doing huge numbers. They were banking on it in terms of ad sales in the upcoming season. There was no reason. They're not looking to get rid of those kinds of numbers.
Yeah.
And one of the untold stories of the success of the Roseanne show is she sort of went against this grain of thinking in Hollywood right now that only to get those kind of numbers you have to do live event programming, sports, or news. I mean, 27 million people watched that.
Incredible.
That's a huge, it's like the 1980s or 70s all over again in television.
Yeah, I always say, and I think you've touched on this too, these Hollywood guys, they're not red or blue as much as green. They like to keep the money coming in, right? So
it's all about the Benjamins.
Next year at this time, you think there'll be some Roseanne entity show on the air?
If I had to put money on it, I would say yes, because they have to pay them anyway. So why not?
Right.
Why not give it a shot?
Okay.
They have to pay them all, I think, $4.5 million.
Wow.
With or without a season.
That's tomorrow money. All right, Michael, always good seeing you, my friend, on a Saturday, no less.
I came in from the Hamptons just for you.
I know you did.
I could be with Clooney right now. He called me up and said, where are you going? I said, George, leave me alone.
Oh, for God's sake. He's the best. I've never seen him in a bad mood. Always makes me suspicious. All right, the lesson from obviously Roseanne, I should say, and Samantha Bee. You ever notice the tone and the language they're using? I'm talking to a congressman, a minister by trading, a pastor who just says, we got to stop this. We just got to stop it after this. All right, I really don't much care whether you're on the left or the right, Republican or Democrat, but the language and the nastiness that's being tweeted back and forth, whether it's Roseanne and her comments or Samantha Bee and her comments, I genuinely am leery of firing anybody over stuff like this. It's a slippery slope, but it's just the tone that bothers me, and it harkens back to a time when we didn't use language like that, and we didn't devolve into something like that. So I know someone's going to come back and say, oh, you're making a political statement. I'm really not, which is why I brought Missouri's Democratic congressman, and a pastor, I might point out, Emmanuel Cleaver, to just step back from all of this. Congressman, every time we've chatted, you're very big on just saying to both sides, we got to bring this down a notch or two. And then lo and behold, all these developments this week. What would you recommend? I'm not so much talking to you as a congressman, but as a man of faith. What would you do?
Well, the first thing we've got to do, I think, is make sure our country, the people in our country, recognize that we are tearing through this fabric that was so carefully woven together by our founders, and we're tearing it. And Roseanne Barr says something dumb and idiotic. Then Samantha Bee, who I've had never even heard of, says something that's also filthy and shouldn't have said it. And so then the people with Roseanne Barr says she was fired. She shouldn't have been fired. The people with Samantha Bee says, what she said is not that awful, and let's keep going. And it's building up. And I am afraid, Neil, and I'm very, very serious, that if this continues, our grandchildren may not have the same kind of country that you and I and millions of others watching were able to enjoy. And so, but it's got to start, I think, with the elected officials. Wouldn't it be fabulous if we had a remorseful president and a Speaker of the House, maybe of the other party, or a Democratic in the White House and a Republican Speaker, and they open up a session of Congress, a new Congress, by saying to the whole nation and to Congress, look, name calling is out. We're going to work together. We don't have the same ideology. We're going to work together for the betterment of the country. And I think that would be a major step in moving forward, instead of the hostility being just pushed out daily. All you have to do is turn on television. Something new and nasty has come along.
No, you're right. I mean, if you think about it, Congressman, I mean, nastiness works in campaign ads as well as ratings on broadcasts. I mean, you can devolve into sort of, crazy territory and put up some very, very good numbers, or you can step back, risk maybe ratings that aren't so great, to just have a discussion and try to move the ball forward that way. But there used to be a time, and I'm going back not too long ago to Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, two opposing parties and points of view, but they didn't curse out each other. They talked to each other. They didn't always agree. In fact, most times they didn't agree at all, but they came to find some common ground and move forward.
Yes, I've had one of Tip O'Neill's grandchildren, Catelyn, is a friend of mine. And I love talking with her about her granddad and this weird but helpful relationship he had with President Reagan. And they were able to solve the issue of Social Security, at least for a couple of decades. And I am absolutely convinced that we have people who can do it, but it's going to take courage.
You're right.
I mean, I get people angry with me all the time because I didn't vote against. I voted to table the resolution of impeachment.
Yeah, it's crazy, and I wish we had more time, but I don't have any more time, Congressman. I don't know what's going on. But seriously, I don't have any more time. I don't know what's going on, but I do want to have you back. I mean, you do provide a level of just calming everyone down, which will continue in the next hour after this.